Hi, everyone. Pastor Galen, lead pastor at Cheyenne Hills Church. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We hope that these podcasts will be a real encouragement to you on your spiritual journey. You can also connect with Cheyenne Hills at CheyenneHills.org. Hope you enjoy the program.
We are across the street and around the world, Cheyenne Hills.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Nathan, welcome back to Wyoming.
It is good to be home. It's good to see you, man.
Well, so you've been in Florida, I guess, right? And doing some speaking down there.
Yeah, Florida.
And hot and miserable and
96 degrees, but like 94% humidity.
Perfect. Yeah, that's right. So does that mean, were you gone during Frontier Days, or did you take in Frontier Days?
No, I did get a portion of Frontier Days.
All right. Yeah.
And then, but prior to that, then Des Moines, Iowa.
Okay.
Prior to that, I was out in California with the in-laws on that part.
Nice. So you had some vacation time out there. That's good. Well, I want to talk about some conservative things. You mentioned about my hat, and I did. I got this over in Laramie, and you said you knew this company.
Yeah.
And some of the students at the West Institute put these together. What's the deal?
Yeah. There's a place there called Range Leather.
Yeah.
And you can spot them from a mile away.
Yeah, no.
Because they have
big
that
old
really,
logo, yeah.
Right, and they're well-made hats.
Yeah.
But the fun thing is when you go and buy from Range Leather, by and large, first of all, the man who started Range Leather, I cannot remember his name right now, but he's a wonderful Christian man.
Okay.
Is very faithful in church over there, and then he hires a lot of guys who are taking a seminary class at the West Institute. So they'll come in from all over.
They'll work in the. I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
They put them together. They do the sales and everything else.
Really good quality stuff. I mean, billfolds. I need to go get a billfold because I wore mine out. And
they make purses. I've seen.
I don't need
belts.
a new purse, but
I'm glad to hear that.
But no, that's really cool.
I wore two of their hats all over Israel.
Did you really?
They're just great.
Yeah, I got this one. This is kind of my work hat. We've been doing stuff outside and everything, so I didn't want to. I saw my hat head is so bad that I thought I could keep my lid on.
Yeah, you look cool with that.
Yeah, well, thanks for that.
I don't quite look right. So.
Well, I want to talk about some interesting things. So. Can we talk about the interesting development, or is it too soon? There's a bit of change in leadership and some things here in Cheyenne. Can we talk about that yet?
That might be a little too soon, but I do think that we're going to have more details in the coming weeks about some ways in which I think we have opportunity for positive change in Cheyenne. So we should hold off, I think.
Okay, that's fine. But it could affect. It definitely has an impact on education.
I believe so.
And it possibly even could open up some new avenues of education that kind of we've been hoping and praying for.
Hope so.
Would that be true?
I think so.
It's possible. So anyway, I'll leave that one alone for now, and just to tease a little bit. But you had last time we talked about some conservative things, some conservative platforms, and how it aligns with Christianity. And I think we kind of got through 1, 2, or maybe we just talked about it in principle. But would you kind of want to back up and kind of let's hit some of those things, what it means to be conservative, and you mentioned one time about a guy that if he was a politician. Years ago, he would be in a different party, and he would be actually left of that party. And it seems to me how really things have shifted so much,
right?
That people really haven't changed that much in their position, but based on the new way of scoring, whether you're conservative or liberal, it's kind of shifted under people's feet. So I think it's important for us to kind of understand, what does conservative mean and what's it look like?
I like how you frame that question, because there's a lot of terms that are passed around.
Yeah.
And for us, the question is, how does a Christian respond to those kind of questions? What is a conservative? What is a liberal? What is a libertarian? What is a Marxist? What is a leftist? And is that different from anything else? And so
now you got my curiosity up. I want to hear your definition of those. Yeah.
And those are kind of questions that really we could go for a very long time to try to describe all those differences. And yet at the same time, when you look at all of those issues, you'll come to a general understanding that, depending on how you define it, a Christian believes in an enduring moral order, if you will. This is also called by some who are outside of Christianity, they'll point to that as being natural law.
Yep.
Then within the Christian tradition, there are two different broad differences between the way a Catholic and the way a Protestant or evangelical would look at natural law. But both recognize that there is something called natural law that undergirds all of
Everything.
time and space. That's right.
That's right.
So when we talk about conservative, what that generally does is points people back toward the fact that there are underlying laws that undergird who we are.
Yeah.
So it's probably a month ago now that we talked about the first 5 of those principles, and they're found really in the work of a man by the name of Russell Kirk, and I cannot recommend his book more highly. His book is called The Conservative Mind. Now, he wrote many books, but that's the most famous. The conservative mind, first and foremost, goes through, here's the first point he raises. The conservative believes that there exists an enduring moral order, that human nature is constant and moral truths are permanent. Human nature is a constant, meaning that people are not generally getting better over time. That when we talk about the principles that our founding fathers were talking about in the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution, that human beings then and human beings today are not any better or worse than one another. What they are is they all have a certain nature, the Bible would point to, as that we are fallen.
Okay.
And so when we talk about moral truths being permanent, this really matters. Now, the interesting thing is, even those who were not Christian, 25 centuries ago, Plato spoke of the same general phenomenon. He noticed it in Greece. And people understand this, regardless of what era you come from. People understand that there are permanent things. And so we need to emphasize that. Secondly, conservatives adhere to custom and convention and continuity. What that means is they don't just overturn every generation all of the world around them, that they recognize that there are things that we inherit. There's a reason why they came to us.
Traditions.
Right.
Yeah.
So, for instance, when the French Revolution, so Russell Kirk and the man that he admired the most, Edmund Burke, what he was looking at is across the English Channel, France was going through its Great Revolution at the time, and it was horrific. It became the Reign of Terror. They were trying to do everything from reorder how many days are in a week, to renaming all of the months, to starting over the entire calendar over to year 1. They called it the year of Thermidor 1. I don't know how they came to that, but that's how they.
Why? What was their?
They
purpose there?
They believed that they should reestablish everything. That all things prior to that should be overturned, and they should remake everything.
Wow.
And so that a conservative believes that that is a very deadly thing to do.
Sure.
And sure enough, even in that instant, it's very important.
Yeah.
So then the third thing, conservatives believe in what could be called the principle of prescription.
Okay.
And what that means is that conservatives have a general sense that modern people are dwarves. Modern people are dwarves standing on the shoulders of giants.
Right.
And that there are many people that have great stature in the past that ought to be heard because they gave us an idea or ideas that are very important. They're basic understandings that we ought to, every one of us, we ought to know.
Well, even things that we learned from huge failures.
That's right.
Nuremberg trials. I mean, there's a lot of things you can learn from the failure of humanity in that whole. And so I wouldn't call those people giants, but the conclusions of like, you know what, this was evil.
We can also see that principle found in the New Testament, where the Apostle Paul points out how the people in the Old Testament were there as the old King James Version calls it in samples. That's not even a word in the modern language today.
No, I didn't even know that.
We just use the word example.
Okay.
So it means almost the same thing. Of course, if you go back into Greek, there's probably some nuance of difference there.
I didn't know that.
That's why it's used that way. But that does not mean that every person in the Old Testament was perfect.
No, for sure.
But we learn from them what to do and what not to do as well. Yeah. So a conservative has that recognition of those things. So then the fourth thing, conservatives are guided by the principle of prudence.
Okay.
And so Edmund Burke, the forefather of conservatism, he addressed Plato in this way. He said that Plato understood that prudence was the chiefest of virtues.
Okay. That
many times when you see something out there that is important, some people have the tendency to lunge all the way in to just, it'd be like if you were an investor and you see a really good stock that's making a lot of money, like Enron,
Okay. Get
the
all
wise
in.
person, yeah, the wise person says, well, let's be prudent.
Right.
Okay, you might want to put some money over there, but let's not put all of our eggs in that
right.
basket.
Right.
And so, there is prudence. The same thing is true of the issues that you'll face in a modern society.
Yeah.
So conservatives are guided by the principle of prudence.
Would you say that liberals are the opposite of that? Or, I mean, because certainly liberals have a prudence, like in that context, for sure. But would you say in general, is it opposite of these principles?
It would be, so this is what, all those terms we were talking about, the difference between a liberal and a leftist and a Marxist and all
Yes.
that. So there are shades there. A classic liberal actually is in many ways a conservative.
Yeah.
If you go back far enough.
Right. That's true.
Later on, as the term liberal took a different meaning, you still have people like John F. Kennedy, who was seen as liberal,
Yeah.
but by today's standards,
He's
in many
for sure
ways, he would not be.
Yeah.
Well, he would be a moderate,
Yeah.
but tending toward conservative.
Yeah.
But then when you look at a leftist and a Marxist, they're more like that kind of individual that we talk about in the French Revolution, that wants to remake everything.
Okay.
Yeah, we have it within ourselves to make the world over again.
Yeah.
A man who actually wrote a good book, but he, by the name of Thomas Paine, this man's name is Thomas Paine, he wrote a very important book in the American Revolution. But he was a very bad man, so crazy, he actually went to France during the French Revolution, and they thought, that guy's nuts. So they locked him up. Anyway, so when we talk about that, a conservative is just different. The prudence is something that you really sense. Fifth.
Okay, real quick.
yeah,
Wait.
yeah.
So you mentioned leftist, you mentioned liberal. Where does progressive fit into that definition?
Yeah. So progressive was a term that began to be used around the time of Woodrow Wilson
Yep.
in the early 1900s.
Okay.
And they were trying to look at a way to make things like early versions of socialism and Marxism sound more palatable to an American audience. They began to use the word progressive. Now, the interesting thing is, by the 1920s and early 1930s, the word progressive had fallen into such disrepute because people could see that socialism, that people stopped using it.
Okay.
That is, until about the last 20 years,
Right.
when the same ideas, probably multiplied by 5, are being brought back up, but people have forgotten their own history in America.
So would you say progressive today is it laced with Marxism? Is it surrounded? Is it infected? What would you call that?
Yeah, it would be socialism for sure,
Okay.
which is a branch of a kind of Marxism.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
dissecting those terms.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, the other thing too, when we talk about the fifth principle, conservatives pay attention to the principle of variety. They feel affection for all sorts of social institutions and modes of life. And so what that means is, unlike the progressivist or the Marxist, they're not trying to drive everybody in the same kind of way. They believe that you should have the opportunity to go to
Freedom.
a church.
Yeah.
Yeah, or believe something that might be different than your neighbor.
Right.
Whereas the progressivist, the socialist, the Marxist, really just believes that if you don't believe like they do, that you're a hater.
Right.
And so they insist that everyone completely agree with them.
Right. Yeah.
Now, the sixth principle is conservatives are chastened by, this sounds like this is a big word, but this is coming from Russell Kirk. They're chastened by the principle of imperfectibility.
Okay.
Now, that's a fancy word, and a Christian would understand it.
Yeah. You're just not.
You're not perfect.
No, we haven't arrived.
Right.
I'm a broken sinner on. I like how Max Lucado said, "I'm a beggar, helping another beggar find where to get bread." You know,
That's good.
it's good
Yeah.
stuff. It's like, yeah, that's a good perspective on that.
Right.
We understand that.
So you can see where, in many ways, when we use the word conservative, if defined properly, you'll understand that a Christian kind of sees the value in this worldview because they understand, listen,
Right.
what that means is you walk through life with humility.
Mm-hmm.
And it means that you don't overturn things and believe that you have arrived at new truth, that everything else should immediately fall under. You recognize that humility. There is a reason why someone arrived at this opinion at some point in the past. And that's the principle of imperfectibility,
Yeah.
principle 6. Principle 7, conservatives are persuaded that freedom and property are closely linked.
Yeah. Interesting.
Now, this is interesting. The Scottish Enlightenment understood that when we talk about property, now John Locke had phrased it this way, that he believed in life, liberty, and property are inalienable rights.
Okay.
The problem with that is property is you can sell it and it's alienated from you now. But there's a principle undergirding that later on Francis Hutcheson and Thomas Reid and others, David Hume and Lord Keynes, began to pull out of that understanding. And that is this: you have the right to property. It is an extension of you as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I come and claim your property, I've actually violated you as well. That you have something that you own, and that should be considered by everyone else inviolate. It's built right into your heart.
Right.
Well, and that's something that with the Fourth Amendment, the idea of doing a blood alcohol test and stuff like that is considered protected under Fourth Amendment rights, and that's why people brought up the Fourth Amendment when it came to vaccinations being mandated. Is my body internally is covered with illegal search and seizure as much as my house or my car.
Wow.
Yeah. See, what an interesting thought. See,
I
you
didn't
can
know that either, Casey.
it all ties together. Yeah. So that's the seventh principle.
Okay. Very good.
Wow, that's the seventh principle with an immediate response that everybody can remember.
Yeah, for sure.
So now we're looking at principle number 8 of 10. Conservatives uphold voluntary community, which means that they oppose involuntary collectivism.
Yeah.
So you cannot insist that people come to your church,
Right.
or that people go to your gym, or that people eat at your restaurant, or whatever else. Or let's dig a little further. You cannot insist that everyone makes the cake you want them to make. They have a right to choose.
Yeah. Right.
You can't insist that someone make the website that you want them to make. They have a right to say, no, that's I have a voluntary right to choose what I want to do and what not, and choose not to do.
It's almost
And
that
anything less
freedom
than
of
this.
conscience and recognizing that freedom of conscience. Yeah.
Right. And if you truly believe in freedom, if you are physically free, but you're not mentally free, are
Yeah.
you free?
Yeah. No.
And I think that's the question. So that's what they're getting at. That's the 8th principle. Principle 9.
Say 8 again, just as the principle.
The 8th principle is conservatives uphold voluntary community,
Okay.
and they oppose involuntary collectivism.
Got it. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
Principle 9. Conservatives perceive the need for prudent restraints upon power and upon human passions. It
Interesting.
makes perfect sense.
Sure.
doesn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's one where, when we speak politically, the power is the ability to do as one likes. Now, if power is centralized into the hands of one person and they get to do what they like, that means that many, many other people are not doing what they like.
Yeah. It's a tyrant.
Right.
Yeah. So, that whole thing with, his tyrants kind of started back with the Pharaohs. You could just see that, they got upset. I think one of the real cool passages in Genesis was when the Pharaoh, the new Pharaoh had forgot what Joseph did, what he meant and what he meant to that. And so as a result of that, he said, you know what, there's too many of these guys. We're going to oppress them. And so we get to see in the Bible, the first picture of that tyrant or tyranny and oppression of people. And it's like power pressing down on people. And it's like, it didn't work then. It doesn't work now. And it's an age-old dilemma of of power for humanity. Yeah.
Right. So that leads us to the 10th principle.
Okay.
The 10th principle, according to Russell Kirk, is this: the thinking conservative understands that permanence and change must be recognized and reconciled in a vigorous society.
Okay. Wow.
Now, and this can go in several different ways.
I need some
but-
examples here. I agree with it, but I can't think of an example.
So we do know that technology changes and everything else. So if we insist that everyone live, say, their entire lives or live circa 1950,
Okay.
let's say like Cuba was under Fidel Castro.
Okay.
Or let's say it's lived circa, that same era, like North Korea.
Okay.
And so people have no ability to actually adapt or anything else.
Gotcha.
So what that means is that a conservative is not just a stick in the mud.
Yeah. They're
It's just that every decision is weighed through the long lens of prudence and permanent principles, and all of those different things. Now, let's take that from a church context. When you look at that, do you have to sing songs that were written in 1700?
No.
Or
can if you want
1950?
to. Yeah.
You can if you want to.
Yeah.
You have that ability.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But you're right though. When you're stuck in that certain, there's some churches that do say, okay, we're kind of, this is our era. This is where we think it's inspired or whatever.
Right.
And no, that's an interesting thing that conservatives are like, we recognize the value of the past, but we also recognize the newness that God is doing something new.
It's just that everything is going to be weighed through enduring principles.
Yeah.
See, that's where it all boils down. Now, let's look at that from a Christian perspective. What we believe is that we have enduring principles established before the foundation of the earth, encapsulated in something known as the sacred scripture. It's the Holy Bible. Mm-hmm. And so everything that we do as a Christian is looked at through the lens of the Bible. And also, we look at that and live it out in real time. And so we're not wearing the clothes Moses wore or the Apostle Paul wore, but we're still looking at life through enduring principles. And so we recognize these similarities because of a shared understanding of moral order and the universe around us.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Sure. And it's why you can look in Scripture and you say these guys are human. God is dealing with them, and it's like they're just as human as you and I are, and they have doubts and fears and frustrations and all these other things. And it's like it's really refreshing that God, has long suffering with them, because they haven't. But really, nothing's changed that much, and so. No, I get that. That's an interesting understanding of all these principles. I mean, I've got a biblical reference to them, but all these principles are basically rooted come out of Scripture.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's where they were tying it to. I saw over there.
Saw that hand.
I was just thinking about the example you used as for different churches singing different songs, but you're talking about looking through the lens. So if you're looking at the song you're choosing to sing in the church, you want to say, does it fit with Scripture? Yeah. So if you're deciding, no, I'm going to stick with these old hymns because I know they stick with Scripture, or if you're choosing a new song, you look through the lens of, does it fit with Scripture, not just taking it because it's the newest thing.
Yeah, that's exactly
and that's fitting those two together with what you're saying.
Yeah. Well said. Exactly. And I don't think a person could phrase it better because you're still holding all things
Same
up.
principle.
Yeah, to
Different.
Something that is permanent. What years ago someone called first things. These are permanent principles.
Yeah, that's good. Well, these are important things. So, have you been studying these? Is this part of your
most of my life, actually?
Oh, all your life. Okay, so
but there's a book I probably read it several decades ago called "The Conservative Mind."
Yeah,
and that's what they really get at, and that's what Russell Kirk wrote in 1953. But he was going backwards and looking at all of this through the lens of a historian, and looking at those permanent things. And I think they matter very much today.
The thing that sticks in my mind as I just try to think of all of them is that word prudence. I mean, to me, prudence actually, it kind of, I bet you, if we thought about it, I bet it would lace through a lot of these.
Yeah.
You could see prudence in just about each one of these principles.
Again, just 3 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to listen to Dr. Matthew Spalding, who is the head of the grad school for Hillsdale College.
Okay.
Every year, this is now the fourth time I've heard it, he uses prudence from the life of Abraham Lincoln to show what a statesman looks like.
Oh, yeah.
Again, it circles around this word, prudence, that we don't think about very much. Yeah. But Abraham Lincoln used the word a lot, and our founding fathers used the word a lot as well. Yeah. And that's because we can feel a certain thing is right, but we still have to think about it carefully, logically, systematically, and not just lunge from one extreme to the next. Yeah. And a conservative is not a lunger. They're a person that is very thoughtful and deliberate.
Yeah, that's good. I like the definition. I get the picture, and it's a good understanding. It would be interesting to try to unpack, the opposite of that. Whether it's, I'm not sure if the opposite is as leftist or the opposite is progressive or the opposite is liberal, but whatever that opposite is. And then are there some truisms, some consistencies there as well?
And another one to weave in here that matters to Wyoming is a libertarian.
Okay.
So, and that is probably a talk all unto itself.
Okay.
Attempting to come to similar positions but without a full recognition in many ways, or at least undercutting the basis of that enduring moral order. And so that is the challenge there. But that's such a big thing; it would take a while to unpack.
But that's a very key thing, because that's really morality is what what separates even religious thought.
Os Guinness in his Golden Triangle of Freedom really hammers this really hard, that freedom can only really exist in an environment of morality.
Okay.
But morality by itself becomes many different things to many different people unless it is undergirded by faith.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it could be any sort of faith background, but you can't have morality that will last without faith. And then faith is the one that allows that environment of freedom, which has to be rest upon morality on faith. And he calls it this golden triangle of freedom.
Yeah.
And so that's getting right at your heart. You spot immediately, because of that conservative mindset, you spot the natural order of this logical progression of thoughts.
Yeah.
Even if you haven't read Os Guinness,
That's right.
it makes sense. And that's the word, the common sense enlightenment.
There you
Is
go.
common sense. And that goes back to sensus communis with Cicero, and then prior to that to Aristotle and Plato and Socrates.
Wow.
So there you are, by your nature, because you have common sense, you understand the conservative argument.
Wow. Way to tie it all together. That was fun. Thank you, Nathan. That was good. Well, I think we'll probably put a pin in this one, and I don't know if we'll come back or not, but that's a great picture of a conservative mind, a conservative thought, and it's kind of your world.
That's right.
Well, as you are listening in, I hope you will continue, as we've always challenged you to be, strong and very courageous. God bless you guys.